Indianapolis's remains were just recently discovered some 72 years after its loss. What they found is truly fascinating.
Navy divers and high-tech drones just went back to the USS Indianapolis, and what they found left the whole team speechless. They were supposed to just take pictures of the ship to remember the sailors who stayed there. But the mission took a scary turn when the acoustic sensors picked up a scratching sound against the metal hull.
Something catastrophic happened to this ship, and we had to bring back the evidence.
This ship carried the parts for the atomic bomb and went down in 12 minutes back in 1945. Now, 80 years later, the metal is being pushed from the inside out. You honestly could not make this stuff up. Silent pulse from the bottom. At that depth, the world is totally different from anything we know. The pressure is over 8,000 pounds for every square inch. If you put a person down there without protection, their body would be flattened in a tiny fraction of a second. It is a place of total darkness and total silence, or at least it was supposed to be silent. A recent mission using a special drone named the Triton 4 went down to map the wreck in 3 dimensions. The goal was simple. They wanted to preserve the ship as a digital model before the ocean finally ate it away. The crew on the support ship had 12 experts, including 2 men from the Navy. Everything seemed normal until they started testing their gear. The team had sensors that could hear a heartbeat through thick steel. 12 hours before the dive, they picked up a pulse. It was steady and rhythmic. It sounded like something mechanical was still working inside a ship that had been dead for 80 years. The chief engineer said it was just a glitch in the tools, but the sound was too clear to ignore. When the drone finally reached the bottom, the camera showed the ship was in amazing shape. Its bow was sticking out of the mud, and the big guns were still pointing forward. But as the drone got closer, the scratching sound returned. It was louder now. It sounded like something was dragging a heavy piece of metal across the floor inside the ship. Believe it or not, it gets even weirder because the sensors showed the sound was moving. It was not just a loose piece of metal swinging in the current, it was moving with a purpose. The team watched the screens in total silence as the drone moved along the hull. They saw the giant holes where the torpedoes hit the ship back in the war. But next to those holes, they saw long scratches that looked like they were made by something with giant fingers. The metal inside the scratches was bright and shiny. This meant the scratches were brand new. If they were old, they would be covered in rust and gunk from the sea. This was the first sign that the Indianapolis was not alone in the dark. The drone pilot felt a chill as he moved the joystick. He had to be very careful because one wrong move would wreck the drone. They were miles away from any help. The pressure outside the drone was over 5,000 pounds, and it was climbing. The team knew that if the drone shell had even one tiny crack, it would explode instantly. But they had to see what was making that noise. They found a hole in the middle of the ship and sent the drone inside. The inside of the ship was like a time capsule. They saw boots sitting on the floor and a metal water bottle that looked like it could still be used. They even saw a picture of a smiling woman in a frame. These were the things the sailors left behind when the ship started to sink. But the scratching was getting so loud that it was vibrating the drone's cameras. The sound was coming from the forward part of the ship. This was the place where the Navy kept the secret parts for the atomic bomb. Most folks have no idea that the ship was empty of its secret cargo when it sank, but something was definitely inside that room now. The drone reached a heavy door that was still locked tight, but right next to it, the thick steel wall was bent. It was not blown open by an explosion. It looked like someone had taken a giant hand and pushed the metal out of the way. The edges were smooth and shiny. Something had forced its way into the most secure part of the ship. That brings us right to the next big mystery. Unaccounted souls in the deep. Let's switch gears for a second and look at the history of this ship to understand why this is so scary. In July of 1945, the Indianapolis was on a secret mission. It had just dropped off the parts for the bomb that would end the war. The ship was heading toward the Philippines when a Japanese submarine found it. 2 torpedoes hit the side of the ship and it sank in only 12 minutes. Out of nearly 1,200 men, about 900 made it into the water. They thought they would be rescued in a few hours. But here's where it gets tricky. The Navy did not even know the ship was missing. For 4.5 days, those men floated in the open ocean. They had no food and almost no water. The sun was burning them during the day and they were freezing at night. But the worst part was what was waiting for them under the waves. Hundreds of sharks showed up almost immediately. It became the deadliest shark attack ever recorded. When help finally arrived, only 316 men were left alive. The official story says the sharks took the rest of the men. But if you look a little closer, you find the real story. Some of the survivors told stories that the Navy tried to hide. They said that some men were not bitten by sharks. Instead, they were pulled straight down into the deep water. There was no splashing and no struggle. 1 second a man was there, and the next second he was gone. It was like something was reaching up from the dark and picking them off one by one. These sailors said they saw shapes in the water that were much bigger than any shark. They described things that moved with a smooth, scary speed. But in 1945, the doctor said the men were just seeing things because they were so thirsty and tired. They called it a waking dream. But the men who were there insisted it was real. They said the sharks were scared of whatever else was in the water with them. The Navy did not want to hear these stories. They needed someone to blame for the disaster. They put Captain McVeigh on trial and blamed him for losing the ship. He was the only captain in the whole war to be treated that way. He spent the rest of his life feeling sad and getting mean letters from families. Eventually, he ended his own life because the weight was too much. It took over 50 years for the government to admit he did nothing wrong. If you take away all the noise, it is about the secrets the Navy wanted to keep. They knew something went wrong in those 4 days that they could not explain. The number of men who disappeared did not match the number of shark attacks. There were dozens of sailors who just vanished without a trace. The Navy closed the books and hoped everyone would forget. But the ocean does not forget. The scratches on the wreck and the sounds inside the ship match those old stories perfectly. The scratching sounds like someone trying to get out, or maybe someone trying to get in. When you look at the real facts, the Indianapolis has always been a place where strange things happen. Now that we have better cameras, we are finally seeing the proof that the survivors were telling the truth. Wait, there is one big problem. Something pushed through the steel. Here is the part that trips everyone up. The drone moved into the room where the bomb parts used to be. The cameras showed that the room was clean. In the rest of the ship, there was gunk and bacteria everywhere. But in this one room, the walls were bright. It looked like someone was cleaning the room every day. There was no rust on the floor. Then the drone's light hit the back wall. There was another hole in the back of the room. This one was pushed from the inside of the room toward the outside. This meant that whatever made the hole had walked through the ship like the walls were made of curtains. The metal was curled back in a way that should be impossible. It would take thousands of pounds of pressure to bend steel that thick. The drone started to shake as a low hum filled the audio feed. It was not a sound you hear with your ears. It was a sound you feel in your teeth. The acoustic technician said it sounded like a giant heart beating. He tried to record it, but the frequency was so low that it kept breaking the equipment. Then the camera caught a flash of something pale. It moved across the doorway so fast that the pilot almost missed it. It did not look like a fish because it did not have fins that moved. It just glided. The drone's lights started to flicker. The pilot tried to turn the drone around, but it felt like something was holding on to it. He pushed the thrusters to the max, but the drone stayed still. On the screen, the team saw a pale shape come closer to the lens. It was smooth and white, like polished bone. There were no eyes and no mouth that they could see. It was just a long, smooth shape that seemed to glow in the dark. Suddenly, the drone was spun around. The camera hit the wall and one of the lenses cracked. The screen went to static for a few seconds. When the picture came back, the room was empty again. The hum was gone and the scratching had stopped. The drone was sitting in the middle of the room facing the way it came. The pilot did not wait for orders. He pulled the drone out of the ship as fast as he could. Most people look right past this part. The team realized that the drone had been moved by something with hands, or at least something that could grab. A current of water cannot spin a heavy drone and then just stop. The scratches on the drone's shell matched the scratches on the outside of the ship. Something down there was protecting the wreck. Something did not want them looking in that room. As the drone climbed back up toward the surface, the team stayed silent. They knew they had seen something that would change the world, but they also knew that the two Navy men in the room were writing everything down. The look on their faces was not surprise. It was a look of knowing. It was like they were expecting to find something exactly like that. That brings us right to the next big mystery: what the government is hiding. When the drone finally reached the ship at the surface, the Navy took control immediately. They did not let the scientists look at the high-quality footage. Instead, they took the hard drives and put them in a locked box. The team was told the mission was over. They were 5 days ahead of schedule, but they were told to head back to port right away. They were not allowed to talk to each other about what they saw in the magazine room. Every person on that boat had to sign a paper that said they would go to jail if they talked about the white shape or the hum. The Navy said it was a matter of national security, but the scientists knew better. They had seen a creature or a machine that lived 3 miles under the ocean. To say it was big is not even the half of it. It changed everything they knew about what can survive in the deep. The part that nobody talks about is that the Philippine Sea is right next to the Mariana Trench. That is the deepest place on Earth. It is 6 miles deep. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of that trench. If something was living in the trench, it could easily swim up to where the Indianapolis sits. The wreck would be a perfect home for a creature that wants to hide from the light. They have known since 1945 that something was in the water with those sailors. They ignored the stories of men being pulled down because they did not want people to be afraid. But now we have the pictures. We have the sound of the heartbeat in the steel. The Indianapolis is not just a grave, it is an outpost for something else. Is the government hiding these creatures to keep us safe, or are they hiding something even scarier? What do you think was moving inside the ship? Leave a comment below, like this video, and subscribe for more mysteries.